Welcome to PRI's Next Round podcast. I'm Tim Anaya, your co-host and PRI's Vice President of Marketing and Communications. And with me today is my colleague, fresh back from vacation, Matt Fleming, our Communications Director. How are you, Matt?
Good. Happy to be here. Happy to be back at work.
Well, while you were there and I was in Palm Springs for FreedomFest last week, we didn't pick a slow news week to leave town. There was a lot happening, and of course, it was all centered around the LA ICE riots and the reactions of our state's politicians to the riots. And of course, there was a lot of really silly stuff going on. Last week, I joked with someone that I think we could have handed out a lot of Get a Clue t-shirts to people on both sides of the aisle last week. So let's start with Governor Newsom. You know, Governor Newsom is not one to ever let a crisis go to waste, and he was certainly front and center and deciding that, this week, even though 3 weeks ago he was saying, well, we can't afford to have Medi-Cal for all undocumented in California. We need to make them pay more and cut down the cost. Last week, the vibe and feel he wanted to create was, I'm the leader of the resistance and the defender of immigrants everywhere. And, not surprisingly, he did what he said was his most important job, going on various liberal podcasts and sending out emails to his fundraising list. Matt, you were off, but you certainly kind of kept abreast of things. How do you rate Newsom's reactions and response in his leadership during all of this crisis that's been going on in downtown LA?
With Newsom, it's really hard to separate what's a gimmick from what's actually important to him. And I was grateful to be on vacation last week and only pay attention to this stuff a little bit. It was delicious to watch his big speech not go over well because the audio didn't work twice, actually. It got pulled from local TV stations. And to me, it's like a metaphor for his entire gubernatorial campaign. It's all no real attention paid to the details of how things actually get done. It's just a bunch of bluster and nonsense. And yeah, I mean, he is so, as the kids say, thirsty for attention and for his big moment to look like he is the leader of the resistance. And honestly, this is probably going to fall flat like all of his other efforts, because when he doesn't have the Democratic machine behind him, he just seems incapable of picking a plan and doing the hard work to actually get there. So unless this catches fire, I can't see this panning out any better than his, podcast or his previous podcast or his radio station show or his various homelessness, programs or, really any of the other myriad things he's tried to do to get attention for himself.
I watched LATV when that speech was being broadcast, and the technical foul up. I mean, you didn't hear any of it. Right? There was no sound, then they went away, then they came back, and then there was still no sound, and then they came back to it, and it worked for a little bit, and then there was like a double audio, so it was really kind of unintelligible what he was saying, and then the speech was over, and I can only imagine the yelling that was going on in the war room with his internet cheerleaders who produce all of this stuff. Gosh, I can't imagine what they were going through, because hey, when you're a governor, you never get the spotlight like that anymore. Certainly since the days of Arnold, has no, governor gotten live primetime TV on every TV station in Los Angeles. So I'm sure the screaming going on in Newsom headquarters was deafening. I did think of the speech. If you actually go on and watch the speech, I thought it was, certainly ironic that they framed this as his warnings on the rise of authoritarianism in the United States. I guess he forgot his own leadership as governor during the COVID-19 pandemic, but of course that's inconvenient to bring up such things. Then of course we had, not to be outdone by our governor, we had the press conference seen around the world where Senator Padilla decided that he wanted to charge the stage when our Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was giving a press conference in Los Angeles, and despite protestations that I'm a senator, I'm a United States senator. The Secret Service, as they would probably anyone in the same scenario, grabbed him, took him down, handcuffed him, and escorted him out of the room. Now, you got to wonder, what was Padilla thinking here? You as a senator, you don't have a right to go to somebody's press conference and yell at them. If someone, the principal is a Secret Service protectee, you don't have the right to charge at them. I don't know what his thinking was, if he thought, well, I need to now become a leader of the resistance too, but I just thought it was another silly bit of political theater that certainly did nothing for the folks that they claim to be fighting for. Matt, what's your take on the Padilla lunge, if you will?
I mean, it was obviously performative. It's hard to look at it any other way. He went there looking to cause a scene. He caused a scene. Congratulations. I'm looking in my inbox right now in my email, and it's this came from his .gov email address. But it's him getting attention for what he says is I'll always speak up for California, and it's pictures of him getting detained. And you're right, Tim. It's a press conference. It's not his press conference. He's not a credentialed member of the media. Members of the press do not, speak up in the middle of the person's speech. They might interrupt during the Q&A with a little back and forth, but you don't do it during the speech. You certainly don't charge at the person. The security guards were doing everything they should have done. I would say Kristi Noem could have probably handled it better. It seems inconceivable that she doesn't know who he is, but it did all happen fast and the guards handled it. And once they realized who he was after they verified it, it's not like he had to spend the night in a federal prison. They handcuffed him, confirmed his identity, and then unhandcuffed him. And then he had about a 15-minute meeting with Secretary Noem. But it's just so, when we're looking at California lawmakers, Tim, we don't agree with a lot of them a lot of the time. I don't think that's a stretch to say. But I do think we end up living in California, we end up grading on a curve. Like, who are some of the ones that I find to be sincere and reasonable, and I can kind of live with some of their policies some of the times, right? And as a state senator, Senator Padilla wasn't really that bad. I mean, grading on a curve again. He's a thoughtful guy, very smart guy. Studied engineering, I believe, at MIT. I mean, he's a serious person, but the more people seem to be elevated in their political career in California, the more they become complete jerks. And, he went from being a okay enough state senator grading on a curve to being a truly incompetent Secretary of State. He basically had two jobs and he couldn't do either one of them. One was to implement the automatic registration through DMV, and that was just an epic disaster. It was bad policy, but he didn't write the policy, but it was an epic disaster as in terms of implementation. And then as a U.S. senator, he's basically just turned it into a vanity contest where he goes around trying to get as much attention for acting like a jerk as he possibly can. This has happened to lots of people when they go to Congress, lots of people when they go to the United Senate, and it's pathetic to watch. And it's even more pathetic to see anybody defend this as more than a stunt. Secretary Noem should have handled it better. I think that her security detail handled it about as professionally as they could. But this guy is just looking for a scene, and he got it. And cool, he got a scene. Great. Now what? I mean, are we any closer to having a discussion about what he wanted to have a discussion about? Not really, which is why the whole thing falls flat for me. And sorry to go on a rant, but it's just so, we live in California. We want to, the state has real problems. We need a real governor. We need a real representation in the Senate and Congress. We need people who are actually going to be serious and try to solve problems, not just be thirsty for attention.
To your point, remember long ago when Ted Lieu got his start in the California legislature, and even Adam Schiff got his start in the California legislature. They were kind of mild-mannered, serious, moderate, reasonable legislators. But I guess there's something in the water in Washington that turns Californians, when they get back there, into just wild political animals. Well, we will stay tuned to the fallout this week and the further battles that are going on as these ICE riots in LA hopefully calm down and peter out. So this week we have a very apropos guest. Last week, as I mentioned, I was at FreedomFest in Palm Springs, and I was able to interview some very interesting people that we'll be featuring on Next Round in the coming weeks. And this week we talked to Robby Soave. Now, you may see him. He writes for Reason. He has a show with The Hill called The Rising. He's also on a new roundtable chat show on the two-way platform. Robby really wrote, I think, the great primer on all the craziness going on college campuses, that we've seen in recent years, called Panic Attacks. If you want to learn all about intersectionality and all of these, what's the thinking behind all the anti-Semitism on campus and the campus protests, I highly recommend the book. So we just sit down and talk with Robby about all of these issues: Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, the LA ICE riot, Donald Trump. How do we evaluate Elon Musk and the DOGE effort? I think you'll enjoy the discussion. So after the break, enjoy my conversation with Robby Soave. We'll get back to Next Round in just a moment, but first, are you getting PRI's regular email updates? If not, go to pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get the facts you need to fight back delivered every week to your inbox. Every week, PRI sends you what you need to know about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento, and gives you the free market ideas needed to save our state and our nation. By going to pacificresearch.org and clicking the sign up button, you can sign up to have Policy Alert, our weekly roundup of all the best ideas from PRI scholars delivered to your inbox. Or you can sign up for event updates, so you're the first to know when PRI is coming to your community with great events. So sign up now at pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get PRI's content delivered to your inbox each week. Robby, it's great to have you back on Next Round.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So first, it seems like, for us who enjoyed our talk last time on your terrific book, seems like you're here, there, everywhere these days. So bring us up to date with kind of what you're doing and where our listeners, can follow what you're up to these days.
Well, I am participating in the new media space quite a bit. I have a number of news shows I do now, including a daily morning news show called Rising for the Hill, and I also have a weekly media criticism show for Reason Magazine, where I'm also employed. And I just started doing another show called Two-Way. It's on the Two-Way platform.
Which I saw,
it's called
yes.
The Group Chat. Fantastic show. These are all kind of debate formats where I like to be in conversation with some libertarian people, some people who don't have libertarian ideas, and we hash it out and argue and debate, and it's quite enjoyable.
Very good, very good. Now, did you do it from here this week, the Two-Way show?
Yes, I did Two-Way from my hotel room.
Yes. Was everyone jealous of the beautiful view?
They were, although you probably know when you set up and you film in a hotel room, you basically just have to close the blinds, and it looks like you're being held hostage in a bunker somewhere.
Yep.
There's no way to get the beautiful scenery on camera, unfortunately.
Well, we're chatting here at FreedomFest, and lots of things going on as we discuss, but top of mind for us is kind of where we're in the few days and weeks after Elon Musk departed the Trump administration, and we're looking back on the DOGE effort, and it's probably needed at his companies these days, maybe more than at DOGE. So as we look back a little bit, how do we judge the success or failure of the Musk DOGE team and their effort to cut federal spending? Is this going to be something where, it's a welcome spotlight on wasteful spending, or is it just kind of another one of those Washington flash in the pan moments? Seems to me that it was great about setting a tone, not so sure about the sustained, effective way to cut federal spending going forward.
It shined a spotlight. That's what it did. At his speech, the State of the Union type address that Donald Trump did, he was never more effective than when he was listing off federal programs, foreign grants that are massively unpopular, that people are not even aware that are going on. And Elon Musk was calling attention to a lot of that, and the promise was good. And publicity for cutting waste, fraud, and abuse is great. I think the execution is not fantastic in all respects. And also, and I say this frequently, so if people have listened to me on other platforms, they won't be surprised to hear me say this, but it is simply the case that Congress must act to make these cuts permanent, and there is no excuse. Republicans have no excuse now. They actually are in power. They have promised my entire lifetime that if you vote us into power, we will cut government spending. We will get the deficit under control. And we will not do it by raising taxes. We will cut taxes, we will cut spending, we will cut regulation, we will do all those things. That is our agenda. Vote for us. And they have no excuse not to do that now. The Democrats cannot even stand in the way for rescission, which is the process of canceling the funding that Congress has already appropriated, and they still won't do it. Why? They just don't care about doing their jobs? Were they lying all those years when they promised to do something? So that is frustrating. That is not Elon Musk's fault or even Donald Trump's fault. That is the fault of our do-nothing Congress.
Right.
So there's nothing to be said about that that's good. I hope Elon continues to exert some influence over the administration, because I think Elon's instincts are not always, but usually good. Certainly, he is the representative of the libertarian faction within the Republican Party. He is a spokesperson for free trade. He's out there tweeting Milton Friedman videos at the same time that other members of the administration are trying to cancel all trade. So that's a good thing, and I'm glad he's been in those conversations, and I hope this blow up between him and Trump hasn't totally put an end to that. Although, as you say, maybe it's more important that he's off building a colony on Mars. Maybe that's right. We're being too constrained in our thinking.
Right, and they probably will be fighting, then make up, and fighting, then make up again by the time this podcast airs, too.
That could be the case.
As we sit here, Congress is grappling over the one big beautiful bill, and you're right. One of the things that's interesting when you look at it and people are disappointed with what's in the one big beautiful bill. Well, if you look at the vantage point of, I don't know that we've ever cut federal spending in American history. So there's something to be said, well, hey, some's better than none. We have all this big battle over the Senate's going to change the House bill. We're kind of stitched together with Scotch tape, the majority in both houses. Where are we going for this thing? Do you think something's going to pass at the end of the day? Are we headed toward another one of those, the infamous John McCain thumbs down by some other senator? Where are we headed here?
I think, unfortunately, that some version of the big beautiful bill, which is certainly big, it's not beautiful, will pass. That's what I predict will happen. Some cuts are better than none. But, the truth is, if we have to be sober about this, and we have to, tell the truth, we will never succeed in fixing the deficit if we are unwilling to touch or reform the main expenditures of our government. Waste, fraud, and abuse, getting rid of it is great, and there's tons of it, but we're not going to solve the deficit problem on waste, fraud, and abuse, or on foreign programs or any of that. I'm sorry, it's entitlements, it's Medicare and Social Security, or defense spending. You have to massively cancel government departments and fire tons of federal workers. But if they're not going to touch defense and they're not going to touch entitlements, we'll never get things under control. I know maybe it's not politically popular to do that. I think cuts to defense would be perfectly politically popular. I don't think the American people of all ideological bents want more costly foreign interventionism. So that is, to my mind, the great missed opportunity so far, that's been off the table. And then, on the Medicare front, maybe that's more politically fraught. People don't want to lose their benefits, I understand, and people should get what they were promised. And I don't want people to suddenly lose access to health care, but the system is broken, and young people today are being forced to pay into a system. They're being literally robbed when their access to things they're trying to afford, like housing and education and childcare, is further, and those things get more and more expensive for them because it's a generational transfer of wealth to older Americans. And I don't mean it in a cruel way. I love my grandparents just as much as anyone else, but this seems horribly unfair to young people.
Right. And it's also too, I kind of look at it, it's not like they don't know what to do. I mean, it was obvious. My boss has literally written the book on how do you repeal and replace Obamacare. We're still waiting on that one. Politics is the art of the possible. They're not real enthusiastic that much is possible at all, I guess.
That seems to be the reality. At least we're going to get maybe regulatory changes that are good, that will unleash a lot of prosperity. It's no mystery why so many tech CEOs have lined up behind Trump this time around. It's because they see what the Democratic Party has to offer, and what the Democratic Party has to offer is the Elizabeth Warren agenda, an agenda of strangling business at every level as much as possible in the totally misguided name of protecting consumers from harm. But the result of everything people of her ilk want to do is just higher prices for consumers. They fine businesses for deceptive practices, and then that fine is passed on to the consumer in terms of higher prices. Right. So that's the agenda of the Democratic Party, and unfortunately strains of the Republican Party, to be clear. Right. There is certainly the antitrust, love of big government side of Republicans that is bad, but I think the tech people decided, well, if we're part of the Republican Party, we can fight those people. If we're part of the Democratic Party, we get nothing. They all want to regulate us to death, or virtually all of them. Maybe not like Jared Polis or something, but everybody else does.
We'll get back to our great guest in just a moment. But first, are you following PRI on Facebook? By following PRI at facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute, that's all one word, you'll be the first to read free market ideas from PRI's terrific team of scholars on all the hot issues like education freedom, single-payer healthcare, crime, homelessness, green mandates like the ban on natural gas appliances, and more. Plus, when you follow PRI at facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute, you'll be the first to know when tickets go on sale for PRI's must-attend luncheons, dinners, and galas across the state. And you'll be first in line to secure your spot to hear great speakers like Michael Schellenberger, Gordon Chang, Steve Hilton, and many more. So go to facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute and follow PRI today so you'll be the first to know. So while we've been here, we've had the entertainment of the LA ICE riots, and you've had Governor Newsom, leading the resistance in the streets, and you've had Maxine Waters have the door slammed in her face, and we had the shoving of our Senator Alex Padilla yesterday. What are we to make of all of this? Me looking at it, I feel like there's a lot of people we could hand out Get a Clue t-shirts to. How should we kind of sort out what's going on the streets of LA and the reaction these days?
I certainly don't like all of these theatrics that are in some ways good for both sides. Democrats want to show their base that they are doing something to oppose Trump's overreach, and so they want to have their elected officials shoved and arrested and handcuffed for standing up to the administration. That's good for their politics. And Republicans, it's good for their politics. It's appeasing the MAGA base, I guess, to really step up the deportation numbers or the appearance that they're doing something. I don't think any of this is good for our country. I recognize that Trump ran on a campaign promise to be much tougher on illegal immigration, so I obviously know that something was going to happen. I think there is an important difference between doing more, being more aggressive about getting violent criminals off our streets, gang-affiliated people, vetting people better. That's a no-brainer, sure. I think that's quite different from when you're literally sending ICE to camp out at Home Depot parking lots. Right. I don't want to live in a country where we need to carry proof of citizenship at all times. That does start to be a little authoritarian to me. And that was, Stephen Miller's doing. He yelled at ICE officials. He said, "You're not arresting enough otherwise lawful people. Right. I want you out there patrolling the parking lots, not prioritizing the violent criminals." If it's good politics, that's confusing to me. It seems wrong, and I don't want to live. We did, so much of the excesses after the war on terror that we all rubber stamped. We all said we need to feel safe. Yeah. We need to have domestic surveillance and the Patriot Act. We need to take our shoes off in line to get in the airport. Yes. We all regret that now. We all know we let the government overreach dramatically, and I'm seeing echoes of that here. Yeah. If that's fair.
Well, I don't make things very well. So what are we going to do if there's no one there at the Home Depot to help me make things at the house?
Right, because it's two distinct arguments. It's an argument for crime prevention and violence prevention that is a perfectly plausible argument. It's like with the tariffs. If you're making that argument because we need to build things here because China is a geopolitical rival and we can't be reliant on China or its sphere, well, that's a different argument. I can at least see, I will probably disagree with it ultimately, but I see where that argument is coming from. The economic argument that's just, we need to make things here even though it's more expensive because we are prioritizing the needs of this specific labor constituency and not the consumers in general makes no sense. We need to build houses. We need food to be cheaper. We need electronic goods to be cheaper. The American people have said that. It's their number one fury is that things are too expensive. So I just reject those arguments entirely. The economic arguments are very harmful. They're old arguments that libertarianism has been working against for years and years and years, and we are still having to have these same arguments. That you can always make things more expensive and thus good for one specific sector. You could make cars illegal so that bicycle repairmen, do better economically, but we all understand that would be stupid, so we're not going to do that.
Right. So let's talk about the book you're probably sick of talking about. The great book by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, Original Sin, which was reporting on the cover-up of Joe Biden's obvious mental decline. So what's your take on the book and then this kind of, I guess, sort of mea culpa by the authors on their media tour? It seems like Democrats, and to a lesser extent the media, are kind of grappling with, well, how do we deal with these issues and move on? What do you think needs to be done by both, really, to regain the public's trust?
So the media obviously screwed this story up horrifically. That's, definitively shown now. But what I'm increasingly persuaded is that they were not actually in on the cover-up. They were not aware. They should have been aware that something was amiss because they didn't have access to Biden to nearly the same extent as they've had access to other presidents. So they should have known something was off. That's true of the cabinet as well. His own cabinet officials, I don't know how any of them could aspire to have further political ambitions like Pete Buttigieg. Biden was unable to meet with you people. You had to have short meetings, concise meetings, because he was suffering. You had to be aware, and you didn't say anything, you didn't speak out. I think that's very damning. The information but whatever you think of the media's performance, the reporting that they did in this book is remarkable.
Yeah.
We now know that a very small, incredibly small number of advisors, like literally 4 or 5 people, were able to shield Biden from everyone, from top officials in his own party, were able to stop people from having access to him. It's incredible that it took place right under our noses. COVID was the biggest gift to Joe Biden's political career ever because it gave him a plausible cover to not be out there vigorously campaigning. It would have been clear that he was not the same person, that he was too old, but because he had the COVID excuse, and he would never have been president under a normal election season, would have exposed that he was not fit for it, I think.
Right. It's interesting, having worked for elected officials, not certainly who've had to deal with issues like this, but other issues like DUIs have had to deal with and such. It's where you go into the shield mode and the protect mode. And of course, I would welcome the day not to have to meet with the boss, because it would mean there's no work I have to do that day. But, in Sacramento, we had several years ago, there was a state senator who had worse than Joe Biden, obvious like dementia, decline, and they needed her vote. So she would, Howard's, if you have 1 foot on the green carpet, you can vote. So she would have 1 foot on the green carpet. You yell out the vote. It's not a button you push. And her staff was right there next to her, whispering in her ears. The media coverage of it came late, but when they needed her vote, they rolled her out. There was no shame about, she obviously does not have her faculties about her. Should she be a senator at all? And I feel like that kind of instinct, the Biden people probably had a political agenda. But I wonder, is that a little more natural instinct when you're the staff trying to protect the principal?
Well, we see it all over the place. The average age of our Congress has gone way up. This is the oldest Congress ever. These people are, they want to die in office. It's very frustrating. And it's a national security crisis because certainly, and it varies at what age you begin to decline, but particularly with the importance of tech-related issues. Tech is something that is harder for older people to intuitively grasp. The legislative, the policy questions around AI and social media, and I'm sorry, I don't trust people of this generation to think through them with the kind of precision that is necessary for us to lead the next century. It's just the case. I don't know tech as well as people younger than me. It can't go on like this. And the fact that they all want to die in office. Mitch McConnell is far too old. Dianne Feinstein needed to go before she actually
Think
died.
about your legacy, right?
It's just...
You don't have to be there till you die.
Right. It's horrifying that they all want to do that. And there's important work that needs to be done. We get people in office, I guess, who really like the power or the appearance of power and that's more intoxicating than even money to them or something, because they could retire and then retire from Congress and do a little lobbying or a little
Something,
consulting,
right?
and you make a lot more money that way if
That's
you
right.
are in Congress and then you get out. It's not something they can kind of indirectly enrich themselves as in government, but it's better to get out and do it, and they don't want to. They like being in power.
We'll get back to our terrific interview in just a moment, but first, PRI's YouTube channel is must watch. By visiting youtube.com/Pacific Research 1, that's the number 1, you can watch webinars, videos, and other original content, including our new Free City Center video tours and interviews. You can watch as PRI's Wayne Weingarten tours Dignity Moves, a San Francisco nonprofit that is reimagining scalable solutions to homelessness with founder and CEO Elizabeth Funk. And you can check out Stephen Greenhut's tour of a proposed new city in rural Solano County that has generated significant interest and intrigue. You can even listen to previous episodes of Next Round Podcast. So visit PRI's YouTube channel today at youtube.com/Pacific Research 1, that's the number 1, and click the subscribe button to receive notifications about our latest content as soon as it's posted. So last time we had you on, we talked about your terrific, very insightful book, Panic Attack. And if you want to understand all the craziness on the college campuses and all these things, you were a man ahead of your time when you wrote this book, and you really understand it. And, you know, we've seen lately, you know, all the radical left groups rising on campus and terrorizing Jewish students, and then you have the attacks on free speech that you're seeing as well. So now we're seeing, since the Trump administration has come in, right, we have the attacks on Harvard and the other universities to try to change this dynamic. They're repealing international student visas and all of these other things. So how do we kind of reconcile our feelings on these efforts? You know, how should we, as free marketeers and libertarians, think about these policies? I mean, is it the correct path to handle these controversies? And if not, what is the right way to address these kind of festering problems that are still going on campus today?
Well, I am fine to have the administration cut funding to public institutions or private institutions. Why is taxpayer money being directed to them? So if you're going to go at it with that line of attack, I think that's fine and be politically popular. But some of the levels of micromanaging of the policies of Harvard or Columbia that the Trump administration aspires to do just frankly strikes me as a waste of their time and not a good idea. And again, on the international student visas, no, I want the smart, hardworking engineers, computer scientists in China, in India. I want them all here. I want to drain them of those countries. I want them all here. If anything, it should be the reverse. We should stop them from leaving. If we're going to resort to quasi-authoritarian or non-libertarian things, don't do it on the bringing them in part. Do it on the sending them back part. Keep them here. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I think that policy is bad. And Trump himself has said in the past that he wants foreign students, when they come in, they get educated in our universities, and then they leave. He thinks that's stupid. He said on the All In podcast, no, then they should get some kind of visa where they remain here and they work here and they enrich our society. That's the better way to do it. You know, if Harvard is doing things violating that are contrary to civil rights law, as it was in terms of admissions, it was absolutely proven in court that Harvard was discriminating against Asian admissions and white admissions in favor of diversity and race quotas, and that's illegal, and they were finally stopped from doing that. That's great. I don't see why we have to micromanage them much beyond that. And then in terms of, you know, the anti-Semitism and the radicalism, the campus administration should and must have policies against violence or against occupying buildings or obstructing class functions or standing in people's way when they're going to go to class. That's all fine to counter that. But some of this is going, you know, they do have the right to have these protests and to disagree with what Israel is doing. And I don't think all criticism of the Israeli government is inherently anti-Semitic. And some people do make it sound that that's their belief. And I think that's not, just like saying it's not anti-American to say that I don't like what our federal government is doing, right? That's not the way it is.
Right. So Democrats in California nationally are trying to, and you'd think they'd get on it a little more, but they're still all these months later trying to figure out the last election. Now we have this highly publicized effort where they're trying to figure out how to appeal to male voters. And we've had this, they're going to spend all this money to find their next Joe Rogan. And we've had this momentary David Hogg interlude as an official on the Democratic problems. And that alone probably shows they still have a lot of work to do. So what's your view here? What should Democrats be learning and trying to do to have a broader appeal?
So to be clear with David Hogg, so he got elected vice chair of the DNC, and then he goes on TV and says, I do think Democrats have a problem with young male voters, are not appealing to them, are uncool and are shaming of young people, and it's culturally at odds with what young men think. And he was talking about all these problems, and I was listening. I think there's a lot of wisdom to what he's saying. Then they immediately delegitimized his election, the DNC.
Yes.
They kicked him out and said that the election itself was not diverse enough in favor of this older Native American woman who said it was unfair to her the way he was elected. I think that encapsulates their problems in a nutshell.
Yes.
I thought David Hogg was necessarily that politically savvy, but this is the stupidest decision I've ever seen them make. Yes, they need a liberal Joe Rogan, but the problem is that Joe Rogan was himself a liberal until out-of-the-box contrarian thinking became so unfashionable in liberal circles. The problem they have now is the thing Joe Rogan does is he says both parties are kind of bad and everybody's corrupt, and I think all these different contrarian things, some of which I think are crazy and some of which I think I agree with, and he's all over the place, and he said, and at the end of the day he says, but here's why I like the Trump guys a little bit better than the Democrats. If you had the liberal version of that, the Democrats would reject that immediately. The first thing he said, well, here's what I don't like about my side. They hate that. They don't like dissent. They don't want to, give up on anything. So it's just not going to work. And also it arises organically. I mean, the Democratic Party is very much captured by elite sentiment and mainstream organizations. Republicans, funny enough, now are the faction of distrust in institutions. Democrats are the people who trust institutions. It used to be more split. Republicans trusted the military, they trusted law enforcement, they didn't really trust education or the media, but they trusted the FBI. Now Republicans don't trust the FBI, Democrats do. If you're a distrusting, skeptical-minded person, you're more likely to be in the MAGA coalition. If you think the experts and the elites, they got it all right, you're a Democrat now. And so there's not really room for a Joe Rogan-like person, or an alternate media ecosystem is very unfriendly to that set of beliefs. So that's their problem, and it's going to be a difficult one to solve. They're aware they have this problem.
Right.
I will give them that credit. They have correctly pinpointed that this is a major problem for them, but they don't have a good solution to it, and there's no obvious.
So let's close our talk with a little discussion of the two most prominent Californians on the national political scene, and dominating here, and this week especially, is our great Governor Gavin Newsom. And, there's a lot of national interest in Gavin, and he's certainly, despite his denials, taking steps to position himself for 2028. And when I listen to the Washington and national view of Gavin, it's quite different from how we see it here in California, because I see Gavin as he's always about creating a vibe, setting a feel, far more important than actually accomplishing something or sticking to his ideological points. And really that following what he does is a lot more important than what he says. So from your vantage point in D.C., how do you view Gavin Newsom and the bubbling Gavin Newsom 2028 effort?
I absolutely think he will run for president. It's going to be very awkward if Kamala Harris also runs for president, which, contrary to every expectation I have, she seems to want to do. I can't believe she wants to do this again. No. It's astonishing to me, but I think she does. Gavin Newsom, I mostly just associate him with bad COVID governance in particular, so he didn't seem like a very smart Democratic choice to me. I will say, to his credit, the podcasting he has been doing seems to me that I think he is cognizant that Democrats have had a problem reaching out to the people we were just discussing. And he had a kind of interesting conversation with both Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon. And I think you do that if you want to run for president. He might end up being a little bit of a savvier political operator than I was giving him credit for. And I think with what's happening, his conflicts with Trump and the immigration scene, it's raising his profile within the Democrats, and is probably making it more likely that he would get the nomination. Could he win against J.D. Vance? He certainly could. Would I expect him to? I don't know. It's going to be him and I guess Kamala Harris, and I think Josh Shapiro will run for president. I think Gretchen Whitmer will probably run for president. I think Pete Buttigieg might run for president, and it's probably going to be one of those people. And, we'll see. It's a closely divided country when it comes down to it. Trump won convincingly. He won every swing state, but he won every swing state by a small number of votes. The Republican Party hasn't necessarily figured out yet how to win elections that don't actually have Trump's name on the ballot, and they're going to have to figure that out. So we'll see. I think Gavin Newsom might be a little bit more formidable than some people on the right expect, but that is not an endorsement of him, and I don't want him to be president. I think his COVID governance is appalling, but he is not without some skill.
And the thing, too, that will make him tough to run against is he has ticked a box on every issue you care about. So if you're a businessman in South Carolina, he can say, I'm a business owner, I've done this, I've never raised taxes, with an asterisk. Yeah. I've not done this, I've not done that. If, LGBT is your thing, who's done more than him? He has all the things. So whatever your issue is, single payer, if that's your thing, he's got a thing. So whatever your issue is, he's got something for you. How that'll translate, it remains to be seen. But I agree, he's going to be tougher to beat than people think on the national level. Now, the one who may not be as tough to beat on the national level, has already been beaten on the national level, is our Kamala Harris, and she's kind of the enigma. And there's this question of what's she going to do? Is she going to run for governor? All the 20 people running for governor are hoping no. Is she going to run for president again? Is she going to get her own Oprah show and make a lot of money?
That's what I would think she would want to do, but she doesn't. She wants to be president. Running for governor would be insane to me. Being governor of a large state like California is a demanding job. It's much more demanding than being the vice president. I can't. Why would she want a harder job as her next thing? She does want to run for president again. I guess if I'm trying to put myself in her heels,
yes,
she might say, I didn't get to run the campaign I wanted to run. It was at the last minute. I had 100 days. She was handicapped by having to work with Biden's team. She didn't have time to hire her own campaign staff. There was not time to find those people. So she had to use the people that were just Biden's campaign. And the problem with those people is, because they were all hired by Biden, they were all Biden loyalists, they did not let her throw Biden under the bus or distinguish herself from Biden at all. They did not advise her to do that because they were Biden people. And that killed her. That killed her campaign. That she could not at any point say, love Joe, but here's what he did wrong and I would do differently. She never had that moment, even though this was a president with the lowest approval ratings ever. So maybe she's thinking, if I got to do it my way and hire my people, I could have won if I'd had more time. The problem with that thinking is her highest watermark was the day that she entered the race, and then it just continued to go down from there. When she ran herself for the Democratic nomination, her candidacy went nowhere. She was like losing to Andrew Yang in the California primary vote. There's never been any evidence from the electoral perspective that this is an appealing candidate that people really want to vote for. But that's a hard lesson to learn, so she might very well give this another go-round. And look, in that field I just described, it would not surprise me if she was the one who won the nomination by virtue of being the best well-known at this point. She was the former vice president. It's to some degree a name recognition contest. I mean, Joe Biden, when he ran against a bunch of other people, he trounced them because he was the most recognizable figure. The runner-up was Bernie Sanders, who was the second most recognizable figure. So it's not rocket science. She could very well win on that basis alone, win the nomination, and then we'll see.
The thought of her as governor just makes us shudder. And what was interesting is when she was Attorney General of California, and I worked in the legislative leadership, I got invited to things, I was around. I have never seen her once in person. Never saw her at the State of the State, never saw her at any of the things that a Gavin Newsom would go to, a Jerry Brown would go to. So if when you were entrusted with a statewide office, you literally were never there, it's not a job you can phone in, as Gavin Newsom is seeing this week. You got to be there and hang around and knock heads together and kind of do your thing. And I just can't see her having any interest actually in doing the job, because she would have run for it instead of senator and probably won then.
Well, and there's a lot of evidence in the Biden book by Tapper and Thompson that she was not behind the scenes particularly politically talented, and the Biden team was not overly confident in her abilities just as a politician,
Right.
as a politically effective person. And that was actually a reason to have Biden keep going at it, because they didn't have much faith in her. But of course, then that's baffling, because why did you pick her? Why did you elevated her to this position purely for diversity-related thinking? Again, it shows the self-inflicted wounds of a kind of DEI wokeness, or whatever we're calling it, on the Democratic Party, that they elevated someone to prominence. They set themselves up to have this person be the nominee, or be a likely nominee for the foreseeable future, who's not particularly politically talented, and they picked her for diversity reasons. And when you pick people for diversity reasons, you often don't get the best people.
Well,
so generally applicable lesson.
And just think, if not her, we might be talking about Vice President Karen Bass today.
That's right.
On that note, Robby, thanks so much for joining us on Next Round. It was great to see you again.
My pleasure. Nice chatting with you.
If you like this episode, please tell your friends and subscribe to PRI's podcast at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And when you're on these platforms, don't forget to give us a big 5 stars. If you don't subscribe to any of these, you can still listen on PRI's YouTube page, youtube.com/Pacific Research 1. That's the number 1. Thanks for listening. I'm Rowena Ichon. Hope you'll come back again for Next Round with PRI.